Well, let's look at a whole new chapter, a whole new unit, and this unit is on managing your money. I'm sure a lot of this first section, section 4A, is going to be common sense to you, but it doesn't hurt to revisit your finances, get you thinking about them, and most importantly, talk about keeping your personal finances under control. I'm actually sitting outside right now, so you may hear some bugs or maybe a car passing by, but it's too beautiful to be inside today. So let's talk about managing your finances. According to some studies, when it comes to personal happiness, some studies show that the amount of money you have is less important than having your personal finances under control. So here's some common sense things again. Always know your bank balance. Don't try to guesstimate. Know exactly what you have. Know exactly what you spend. Write all that down. Sometimes we get lazy, but know what you have in your bank account. Know what you spend. And raise your hand if you're guilty. Don't buy on impulse. Been there, done that, regretted it a few times. But always step back and think, is this something that I really need or can I really afford it? And something that I hope you all have is just a personal budget. Make a budget. See how much is coming in, see how much is going out, and take a look at your monthly net income. That's an important thing to know. Am I in the red? Am I in the black? So you may not realize some of the things you do every day or several times a week really do add up in the long run. So I've got a few things here that I'd like you to compute the cost per year. So take a second and maybe just look at A, C, and maybe F. Take a look at those and calculate if you spent $5 a day on coffee, what would you end up spending in a year? Part C says if you spend $1.25 on soda 2 times a day, what would you spend in a year? And Part F says, well, suppose you go out to lunch 5 days a week and you spend $8 every time you go out to lunch. Let's see what that comes out to be over a year. So take a second and make those calculations. So check your values with mine. $5 a day on coffee times 365 days a year, you're spending $1,825 a year on coffee. $1.25 on soda twice a day, 125 times 2 times 365 days a year adds up to $912.50. And then Part F. Lunch 5 days a week at $8 a pop. So 8 times 5 times 52 weeks in a year, we're looking at $2,080. You don't think of that when you're doing it, but in the long run, those things really add up. So think about something that you indulge in frequently and determine that cost per year. You'll notice I filled in the other values here. Part B says you spend $7 on breakfast 3 times a week. That adds up to $1,092 a year. $10 on lottery tickets per week. Well, there's 52 weeks in a year times 10, that's $520. What about $60 every 2 weeks to go to a club or concert? Well, that's $120 a month times 12 is $1,440. So did you think of something you indulge in and determine its cost per year? Were you surprised? Would you consider cutting back because of its cost? I had one student mention that they bought comic books every couple of weeks, so 2 times a month, and the comic books were $1.25 a piece, and they bought like 6 or 7 at a time, and that added up to quite a bit. It's like, oh my gosh, I never thought about that. Didn't realize that, I guess I should say. So I'm sure you know how to create a budget. But let's just go through the steps. Let's remind ourselves. First, list all your monthly income. And if you get like, I don't know, maybe some scholarship money twice a year, you want to prorate that for an entire year to consider your monthly income. Then list all your expenses, your monthly expenses. Then subtract your expenses from your income to determine your net cash flow. If you need to make adjustments, then make any as needed. Our goal is to have positive net cash flow. Otherwise, we get into trouble. So here's some things to think about. Why is it important to understand your personal finances? Think about some things. One of my students said to stay out of debt. Definitely, that's important. Although some debt is necessary to create a high credit score so you can actually purchase big items like houses and cars. But you do want to stay out of debt as much as possible. And you certainly don't want to visit any of those payday advance places. They charge like 700% interest on that. Another thing is to remain stress-free. If you have a lot of debt, that is a huge monkey on your back and can cause a lot of stress. I mean, you watch the news, you listen to the radio. There are so many cases of people basically committing suicide over their financial situation. So keep your life stress-free. Always understand your finances. Okay, so if you have a positive monthly cash flow, what does that mean? Well, that means that you have more income than you have expenses. And if you have more income than expenses, then you have some leftover money at the end of the month. So what would you want to do with that leftover money? I would suggest to save it. One of my students said to splurge. You can do that, but just so you're saving some of that. Negative monthly cash flow means your expenses exceed your income. Big problem. You're in the red at the end of the month. You don't have enough money to pay your bills. So what do you need to do? You need to make some adjustments. Whether it's cutting out a particular entertainment that you enjoy, I don't know, getting rid of a home phone. There are adjustments you can make if you have a negative monthly cash flow. So here's a good question regarding college expenses. How should you budget for college expenses that occur twice a year? For example, you pay $3,500 in tuition each semester, and we're assuming you're just going 2 semesters, $750 in student fees each semester, again, just 2 semesters, and the same, $800 for textbooks each semester. How could you prepare for those expenses? Think about that. So, to determine this cost, or how you should budget for your college expenses, you could determine this cost on a monthly basis. Over a 12-month period, how much is this monthly? So I'm going to need to add up all those expenses and find out what I would need to save each month throughout the year to cover those school expenses. Now, you may have parents that give you some money, you may have some grants, you may have some scholarships that would certainly help in alleviating this monthly amount, or this kind of a large monthly amount that you'd need to put away. So the total school expenses would be $7,000 for tuition, that's $3,500 times 2, $1,500 on student fees, that's $750 times 2, and $1,600 on textbooks, that's $800 times 2. So we need to save in a year $10,100. And to do that monthly, if I divide that by 12, I would need to save $841.66 per month to have all of my college expenses paid for that year. So there's one example of just managing your expenses. All right, so now let's look at another one. Determine if this person has a positive or a negative monthly cash flow. So monthly cash flow refers to At the end of the month, do you have more income or do you have more debt? And we want to have a positive monthly cash flow. But let's check these out and see if it's positive or negative. So it would be the easiest way to approach this, and actually the most accurate way to approach this, would be to determine what are your expenses for the entire year. And keep in mind that there's 52 weeks in a year. If you need to use that conversion. So find out what happens in a whole year, then divide it by 12 to determine your monthly income. Do the same thing with expenses. Determine your yearly expenses for 52 weeks out of the year. Divide it by 12 to determine your monthly expenses. So this problem states your income comes from a part-time job where you get $600 a month. You also have a college fund from your grandparents where you receive $400 a month, and you have a scholarship at $5,000 a year. So that's your income. Now your expenses are rent, that's $450 per month, groceries that are $50 a week, tuition and fees, that's $3,000 twice a year, and then some incidentals we have here at $100 a week. So if you determined your income on a yearly basis, you should come up with $17,000, and if I divide it by 12, that gives me $1,416.66 as my monthly income. If you take your expenses, prorate that for an entire year, you end up with $19,200 in expenses, and if we divide that by 12, that's $1,600 a month. Now to find our monthly cash flow, we take the income and subtract the expenses from it, and we have a bit of a problem here because we have a negative monthly cash flow, negative $183.34. So some adjustments will need to be made. Maybe slack off on the groceries or the incidentals once a week, $100 once a week. Cut back on that because you want to have a positive cash flow. Do the same thing for example 4. Work on it. We've got an income of $2,300 a month. Then we have, that's the only income, and then we have expenses of rent is $800 a month, groceries are $90 a week, utilities are $125 a month, health insurance is $360 semi-annually, meaning twice a year. Car insurance is $400 semi-annually. Gasoline, $25 a week. Miscellaneous, $400 a month. And we have a phone bill of $85 a month. So determine those expenses on a yearly basis. Remember, 52 weeks in a year. Then divide it by 12 to find out your monthly expenses. Do that and then compare your answers with mine. For this problem, this example 4, I end up with a positive cash flow. My expenses are not larger than my income. So when I subtract the $2,300 in income and the $2,035 for my monthly expenses, I actually have a positive monthly cash flow of, totally forgot to do that. Let me do that. So positive monthly cash flow of $265. Now I'm doing this as I go. If you ever see that I make a mistake on one of these videos, please email me. I am just as prone to you as you are to making some careless mistakes. Okay, let's see what comes next. Tell you what, we will end this video here, and I will start the second one. I'll have 2 parts to this video.